Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode will have honest conversations with people who have walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today I want to talk about when masks feel safer than healing. You see, there was a season in my life where I became an expert at pretending. If you asked me how I was doing, I would tell you, good man, just staying busy. Or I would say, I'm fine. But those words together, I'm doing good or I'm doing fine, became my go-to mask. It was easier than admitting that I was struggling to pray, that I was struggling to trust, and that I was struggling to believe that God could really forgive me. I think many of us have had versions of that mask. For some, it's humor. If I can make people laugh, then they won't notice I'm hurting. For others, it's accomplishment. If I stay busy, I won't have to feel what's broken. And for others still, it's religion. If I say the right verses and serve hard enough, maybe no one will see what's really going on inside. The mask makes us feel safe. It gives us control. But what I've learned is that what feels safe can slowly become a prison. So why do we hide? Why do we choose the mask over honesty? Most of the time, it's not because we're liars. It's because we're afraid. We're afraid of being rejected. We're afraid of being misunderstood. We're afraid of what people will think if they see the parts of us that don't fit the image that we've built. The truth is that every mask is built from fear. When Adam and Eve hid in the garden, fear was their first instinct after sin. Genesis 3:10 records Adam saying, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. That verse gets me every time. Adam wasn't afraid that God had changed. He was afraid because shame had changed him. Shame convinces us that if people see who we really are, they'll walk away. So we build layers, smiles, routines, fake I'm fines, all to keep from being seen too deeply. But here's the paradox. What we think protects us from rejection actually presents us from connection. We crave to be known and loved, but we settle for being liked and admired. And in doing so, we trade real healing for the illusion of safety. There's a cost to pretending. The longer you wear a mask, the heavier it gets. At first, it feels manageable. You just have to keep the right answers ready and the right smile in place. But over time, it becomes exhausting trying to maintain an image that doesn't reflect reality. I remember talking with people and giving advice about grace that I wasn't allowing myself to receive. I was teaching others to live free, while privately, I was still chained to shame. And that disconnect between who I was publicly and who I was privately started to eat at me. David describes that feeling perfectly in Psalms 32, verses 3 through 5. When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. Then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. When you hide long enough, your soul starts to ache. You can feel it. In your sleep, in your thoughts, even in your worship. Because honesty isn't just about telling the truth, it's about living in alignment with it. The cost of pretending is peace, and the first payment that you make is joy. One of the biggest lies the enemy tells us is that we can control our image and our outcome at the same time. That's a lie of control. That if we keep things looking neat on the outside, we can fix the inside later. Jesus can only transform the parts of your life that you're willing to bring into the light. In John 3:20 through 21, Jesus said, Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. See, that verse isn't just about sin, it's about healing. When we come into the light, we're not just exposing our wounds, we're positioning them where they can finally be healed. When you expose your sin to the light, you're taking away its power over you. The mask feels like control, but it's actually isolation. And isolation is the enemy's favorite habitat because that is where shame grows unchecked. There's a lot of power in vulnerability. There's a lot of power in bringing your sin and the things that you're struggling with into the light. When I finally got honest with somebody about my struggles, I expected them to pull away, but instead, they said something that I will never forget. You are a brave man. Thank you for trusting me with that. You are not alone. That moment was small, but it was holy. Because healing doesn't start with a miracle. Sometimes it starts with a conversation. Vulnerability is terrifying because it feels like surrender, but it's also sacred because it invites grace into the room. When we open up to God and to trusted people, we give him space to rewrite the story that we've been trying to hide. And often the thing that you think disqualifies you is exactly what God uses to help somebody else. In 2 Corinthians 1:3-4, it says, of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. That's what community is supposed to look like. Not a gathering of perfect people, but a gathering of honest ones. People who say, I've been there too, and here's what God did for me. So what happens when we drop that mask? What happens when we are vulnerable? Something really powerful happens when you drop that act. When you do that, peace moves in, connections deepen, and you realize that God never needed your performance. He wanted your presence. That is what walking in freedom really means. It doesn't mean you never struggle again. It means that you stop struggling alone. Honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And real is the only place that God can meet you. If you've been hiding behind a smile or a title or a to-do list, let me say this as somebody who's been there. You don't have to do that anymore. Grace is strong enough to meet you where you are and gentle enough to walk you forward. Maybe today you're realizing how tired you are of wearing that mask. Maybe it's in your relationships, your church, or just with yourself. You've been trying to keep it all together, but deep down, you know that something's off. You know that something needs to change. You can't keep pretending, so you have a choice. You can keep pretending, or you can start healing, but you can't do both. The beauty of the gospel is that Jesus already knows every thought, every secret, every scar, and he calls you loved anyway. That's not just theology, that's freedom. In Psalms 34:18, it says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So if you're broken, know that you're not disqualified. As a matter of fact, you're qualified for a miracle. So with this episode, I want to leave you with this action step. This step will be one that's taken intentionally towards honesty. So here's how you're going to do it. First, ask God for the courage. Pray, Lord, show me one place where I've been hiding and help me to bring it to light. Then I want you to write it down. Be honest, even if it's messy. Journal what that mask has cost you, emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. And then I want you to tell one trusted person. It could be a friend, a pastor, a mentor, or a counselor. Just tell them, hey, I want to start being more honest about these areas of my life. You don't need to explain everything, but just take the first step and then take a breath and let grace do what fear never could. Thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. If this episode encouraged you, would you take a moment to follow, rate, and share it with somebody who you think could benefit from hearing from it? For encouragement and information on having me speak at your church or event, or to learn about my coaching services, visit wesleyfarnsworth.com. And don't forget to connect with me on social media. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and freedom begins when we live unmasked. God bless you.